Hello. I wanted to try something a little different tonight. I also want to try out some soft speaking rather than whispering. Part of the reason for that being I want to read you a little story, and I think it makes more sense soft spoken rather than whispered. Just because I'm extra and I like to put little inflections into my readings, into my tones, and all of that. And I'm not sure how well whisper would communicate those things. So, anyway, the inspiration for what we're going to do today came from I've been watching the new season of The Crown on Netflix, and it reminded me of a story that I wrote a couple years ago. I like to write stories. I have a whole bunch of stories that I've written, and this one is kind of loosely royalty inspired, and it's also kind of Christmassy. It starts off like a Hallmark Christmas movie, or like a Netflix Christmas movie, which are the ones that I've been watching. Also, I watch a lot of Netflix. But I thought I would try doing a little reading of something that I've written, which will hopefully have some relaxation, ASMR vibes, but it could also just be a nice little way to spend an evening, a little story for us. Nobody has ever read this story or heard this story, and I've never read it before to anyone, and I'm kind of nervous, but we trust each other, right? We're friends now. It'll be okay. I also have this fun little orb, which I think is a candle holder, but I'm not 100% sure. I kind of just found it and it looked interesting, and it has all these little crystally bits that just look really visually fun. So, I don't know. I thought I'd bring it into a video. Anyway, so what I'm going to be reading is in this notebook here. I am not good at typing. I also am just kind of an old soul, and I love handwriting and paper and leather-bound and all of this beautiful stuff. So I have a bunch of these notebooks and a bunch of just handwritten stories. And again, we can go into as many of them or as few of them as you would like, because the sky is really the limit here. I just have so many words and so much that I apparently want to say. So this story is called Pretender, and we can think of it as, you know, like I said, a Hallmark Christmas movie, at least in the beginning. It does get very complicated at the end, but I'm only going to read the beginning because it's Christmassy and it's cute. So it takes place in a different country, in a made-up country, like they do on those made-for-TV Christmas movies. But it's going to be vaguely British, because that is what we do when we've got a different country. We make them all vaguely British. So I am going to read it in my silly little British accent. And hopefully you enjoy. Hopefully it's a good time for us all. So, once again, this is Pretender, and it is an original. And here we go. It was the first weekend of December, and too early for holiday parties, in my opinion. But the world does have a way of becoming unbearably bleak when the weather grows colder, And so we find any excuse to congregate and socialize and pretend everything is lovely and festive. Perhaps it was for everyone else at the party. They were well off, the sort of people who spent hundreds on a ticket to spend an evening with strangers, charity goers, fresh from their seasonal hibernation, stirred to action by the holiday spirit. I shouldn't have been so critical of them. They were paying me after all. Though I was certain no one had gone out of their way for a ticket simply because I was in the entertainment lineup. I would be background music for a brief set, somewhere between the children's chorus and the aging recording artist who may have been popular in his day but hadn't put out new material in at least a decade. But I suppose either one was more appealing to the masses than an unknown stage actress giving a cabaret of the season's finest theatrical tunes. I did quite well in the right venue. As an actress at an established theatre with a decent following. But theatre could be so niche these days. Some believed it to be the epitome of class, while others couldn't understand why we hadn't been fully eradicated by film. At any rate, I did it professionally and earned a living, which was no small thing. And now I was performing songs, out of context, for an unengaged audience. I never looked at my audiences. They took me out of the mood. But there was no special lighting on the charity stage, so I could see the tables and dance floor plainly. I took a peek at the people. They were enjoying themselves. A few unoccupied spouses appeared to be watching me as their partners abandoned them for conversation or the bar or the restroom. It wasn't that I needed every eye on me. I'd simply go home feeling like I hadn't earned a paycheck if I didn't inspire rapt enthusiasm. I had a habit of putting pressure on myself like that. How I'd survived this long in the arts was truly a marvel. When I finished my set, people clapped politely, and I gave a bow. And as I was not eager to brave the harsh weather and head home, I went to the bar instead. It was a cash bar, and being a charity, the drinks were sure to be overpriced. But I was dressed up and among rich people, so, when in Rome. I also wasn't an avid drinker, and ordering always made me nervous. It seemed a person's drink told more about them than I was able to interpret, so as I waited in line, I tried to scope out the drink of choice for a fine socialite lady on a cold winter's night. That was a gorgeous performance. A gentleman had appeared beside me, not in the line for the bar either. It was almost as if he'd gone out of his way to pay me a compliment. I smiled quite naturally. You think so? I don't know why they insisted on show tunes for something like this. Not really something you can dance to. Surely we weren't meant to dance, but to listen in awe. Oh, he was a flatterer. A handsome flatterer at an expensive charity function. Is that so? I asked, shifting my tone and indeed my posture to be a touch more enticing. I think most people were simply finishing off their desserts. Ah, so I have misinterpreted the social cues, have I? Well, it wouldn't be the first time. Is this what you do? You're a singer? More or less. I'm on company at the Arlington. Oh, you're an actress? Of apparently no renown. Sorry, I don't get out much. I've always wanted to. I mean that sincerely. But in my line of work, finding the time for such things is a challenge. The season isn't up yet. I shook my head. Our last show closes before Christmas. We'll pick up again mid-January for rehearsals. And do you star? I feature. That's how it is at Arlington. Everyone in the company features from time to time. I have a decent role in our current show, which likely means I'll take a back seat after Christmas. Forgive me, but you ought to feature in everything. Truly, you were lovely up there. And perhaps it's my lack of exposure, but you have one of the clearest voices I've ever heard. The way it rings so musically. Oh, no, that's not the right word. Of course it's music. Let me see. I laughed as he legitimately tried to think of the right word. That's all right, I understand. And thank you. I've never received such a shining review. I truly hadn't. Perhaps I was in the wrong career. He smiled. I don't suppose after all my bumbling you'll let me buy your drink? The line was much shorter now. I considered it. I knew what it meant to let a man buy you something. I had to decide in that moment where the evening would take us. No, I said at last. You may not. Oh, he said, defeated. All right then. Enjoy your evening. Hold on. I don't want to drink any more. I was only in this line because I was bored and alone, but now I have a fascinating stranger to talk to. You're here alone, I imagine? He nodded. Yes, we have that in common. Well, I was the entertainment. What would possess such a lovely young man to attend one of these things on his own? That's what I'd like to know. Well, he began a bit nervously. It is quite a story. Shall we sit at your table? I haven't got a table. I'm the help, remember? Right. Well, as it happens, neither do I. You see, it's possible I wasn't expressly invited. I felt a little thrill mixed with very real fear. What? Now, I gave a generous donation at the door, enough that the staff didn't bother asking for my invite, so you mustn't think I'm exploiting the charity. Goodness, no. You've merely bribed your way into a private event, and for what purpose? To flirt with the cheap entertainment? No, sorry, Can we talk somewhere else? He was quite flustered. I tried to study his face for signs of danger. There was something familiar about him, like he reminded me of a friend I couldn't quite place. Still, that didn't mean I could throw caution to the wind. Come with me, I said. I led him to the performers' lounge, which was small and unceremonious. I expected it to be littered with leftover quiet children waiting for their parents to pick them up, but it was quite deserted. So what's all this? I asked. Mysterious actions and revealing yourself to me of all people. What's your game? There is no game. I simply wanted out for a while. I do this sometimes. I heard there was a party, and I wanted to try my hand at mingling. If you couldn't tell, I'm awful at it. And you have the money to just hop around different fancy parties. Why wouldn't they invite you then? That's complicated. Let's just say it's a family issue. My father prefers we keep to ourselves, lest I bring shame and scandal to his enterprise. Have you done so before? Not intentionally. You don't know who I am, do you? I don't believe I do. Good. So who are you? He hesitated. Well, who are you? I stuck out my hand. Alice Dyer. Pleasure. And you? He shook my hand. Ovi. Ovi what? Ovi with a recognizable family name that will almost certainly ruin your opinion of me. My father has a business that is often in headlines, often negative headlines. Please, would you allow me to distance myself for a few hours to make an honest impression? My life was a bit more complicated than merely my shows at the Arlington. I was no stranger to family complications. In fact, there were a few branches of my own family tree I was reluctant to discuss publicly. Fine. Ovi. Can you tell me anything more about yourself without conjuring Daddy's bad reputation? What you do for a living, perhaps? He sighed. I'm in my father's business, in a public relations capacity, trying desperately to restore our image. Poor thing. Well, what else? You know, I'm suddenly realizing how painfully dull I am. I see. I sail. I've sailed with the Navy. Love it. If the business ever goes under entirely, that's what I'd like to do. And that was attractive. He had at least one honourable trade, along with whatever scandal was making him so intriguing to my very bored brain. I sat down on the small sofa, which occupied much of the room. Really? Were you enlisted? Do you have a rank? Not enlisted per se, but I served in an interim captain capacity. Peacetime, of course. I'm sure I'll never see combat. But they were doing routine patrols and upkeep. May I? He gestured to the sofa and I nodded. He sat down beside me. I'd love to know more about you. How did you start acting? The usual way. I saw a show and fell in love. I took dance lessons, singing lessons. Acting coaches were in short supply, but I took the public school drama offerings. And Arlington has open calls when they need a new company member. And I got in. Simple. That's lovely. He had such a nice smile. You've always known what you wanted then? Well, no. Can I tell you my sob story? Have we breached that level of intimacy? Go ahead. It wasn't too difficult to talk about anymore. I'd had plenty of time to recover and move on. Still, saying the words out loud always made them real and relevant. Most of the time I tried to ignore it. When I was 15, my father passed. Passed is a polite word, for he was tragically killed in a bizarre train accident. Can you imagine a train accident in the modern age? But it happened. He was my only parent. My mother wasn't up for the job. It devastated me right to my core. He owned a tailoring shop. It's still there on 4th Street. I grew up around men, hard-working, honest men with just a touch of debonair flair. I loved it, every moment. And when he passed, I lost sight of things. I was very poetically dark and cynical, so naturally I threw myself into art. Before then it was a hobby, but I had to let it become my life, or else I'd have no other life to hold on to. There, have I frightened you off with my emotional baggage? He watched me so sincerely, listening and perhaps feeling my words in his own heart. That's awful. Thank you for telling me that. I feel I know you much better now. 15 is so young. Were you alone? Oh no, I had my uncle. We're not blood related. He and my father were tailoring partners for a while before he came into his own. I went to live in his gorgeous home in the countryside, picturesque like you've never seen. He let me be for the most part. I was fairly grown. But he took care of me when I needed it. He told me I didn't need to go to school for a degree, that I should do whatever it was that made me happy. I may grow to resent it once I'm too old to play the ingenue, but it was sound advice at the time. He smiled. It made me blush for some reason. I hadn't held a man's full attention in quite some time. It was rather heavenly to be listened to. I want to know so many things about you, he said, but I don't know where to start or what to ask. Can you simply keep talking? Just tell me everything you've ever done or ever thought. I feel like your voice is some sort of siren song, like I've been lured in and thoroughly snared. I hope that's all right. I'm not usually this forward. This is forward for you. You've withheld practically everything but your first name, and you think that's forward. He nodded. Oh, you're quite right. I dare say I haven't been nearly forward enough. My heart grew a bit excited at the suggestion of an impending revelation. Tell me your name, I insisted. Not yet. By the end of the evening you'll have it, I promise you. Oh, I have to earn it, do I? He chuckled, but then grew serious. You're right, it isn't fair. So first, let me say I think you are absolutely breathtaking. I meant to keep to myself tonight, make light conversation, certainly not to begin anything. But I saw you and I just... You must think I'm either stupid or a complete cad, but I kissed him. I didn't allow myself to think about it. He was charming and nervous, and I had the feeling he would kiss exceptionally well. But then I remembered he was a person, and I couldn't go acting on impulse without regard for people's feelings. Sorry, I said in a rush. That was too much. I shouldn't have... Well, have I ruined the evening? I was blushing like mad, but so was he. And he wore a much easier grin. Not at all, he said. I dare say you've improved it. He let his fingers brush across my face, drawing me nearer. Alice, darling, he breathed, sending a chill all down my body. I know we've only met, but might we? I kissed him again. Yes, that was my answer. I was out having an evening for a change, doing something boldly out of character and a bit naughty, and it was everything my heart craved. I lived a fairly buttoned-up life off stage, with hardly anything interesting to speak of. This was who I needed to be, just for a night. This was how I needed to feel. He kissed me hungrily once I initiated it. It was as if he were equally starved of affection, and perhaps he was. But it always seemed men have more opportunity in that area, or perhaps they are simply encouraged to make bold, initiative moves. Avi needed very little encouraging. With my permission secured, he kissed with absolutely no restraint. We went a bit prostrate on that sofa, and I did get a bit nervous. He didn't seem the sort of man to have it all out in a technically public place, but he might have been. I should have stopped it. Really, I should have gone home and been done with it. But it felt so good. He kissed my neck, and I went positively giddy in delight. I couldn't stop. I needed this. His hand was on my thigh, casually more or less, really just as a point of stabilization and leverage. But as we carried on, our bodies synchronizing rather gorgeously as we caressed each other, that point of leverage drifted higher and higher, and I leaned into it, physically, and I kissed him endlessly with no regard for consequence, not so much as a thought to what I'd say once we came up for air. When my father died, I went to live with my Uncle George. It was true he'd once been a tailor like my father, but he came from a wealthy family and eventually inherited the means to be influential. He was a passionate speaker. My father would love that about him. Sometimes we'd have meals together, the three of us, and they'd begin talking about things I didn't understand. I remember the light that would come to my father's eyes when Uncle George made a particularly bold statement. Oftentimes he'd retort with a quip to make Uncle George laugh in his deep, booming way. They filled the whole house with his strange and dazzling energy. Uncle George was quieter when my father passed. He became secretive with me when his friends came round. I knew he loved me. There were simply parts of his world it was better I didn't know about. I knew generally what causes he was backing, but there was always the suggestion of something sinister. The way his eyes would dart away from me, in shame as he ushered his comrades into the Home Office. He wouldn't talk about my father or the accident. Instead, he devoted himself wholeheartedly to his work. But I suppose I'd done the same. I knew a man could have honest intentions, even when harbouring secrets. It had been my whole upbringing. So perhaps that was what compelled me to trust Avi that evening, to let him kiss me and touch me more intimately than anyone ever had before. But there was no explaining why, when his fingers brushed my skin, I felt electric waves trace over me like gossamer threads, forming patterns as they danced even beyond the point of contact. Or why, when he kissed me, my mouth admitted him so perfectly, conforming to him, matching the rhythm of it. He was a beautiful man, but I had known beautiful men before. Never in my life had such a dangerously severe attachment occurred in so short a time. Just when I was beginning to come down from the exhilaration, enough to consider whether or not these feelings were sustainable enough to ask to see him again, the door was flung wide open. Oh, those poor, quiet children, that was my initial thought. Or if any of the other performers were coming for a break, only to find me tangled up with a man. A fine image I'd made for myself. But as Avi and I parted, I saw they were men in dark suits and well armed. "That's quite enough," one of them addressed us. "Let's see your hands. In the air, let's go." God, I should have known. A complicated family business with negative repute. He was involved in some sort of gang, which now meant I was involved in it, and a man now had a gun aimed at me, and what a rotten time for me to choose to be adventurous. Avi stood up, not at all afraid of them for all their numbers and weapons. "Stand down. Are you serious? I'm fine, all right? She's just a girl. For God's sake, Stuart, put the gun down. You're embarrassing yourself." Stuart became less intimidating as the other seemed to agree he was acting foolishly. "Thought you'd give us the slip, did you?" One, who I could tell was in charge, asked. "It isn't wise. I'll have to inform your father." "There's no harm done," Avi insisted. "No harm? I've been worried sick about you. If I lose my prince, there goes my head. You can imagine the stress of it." Avi smiled a bit. "Oh, and here I thought you actually cared about me." The man chuckled and reached into his pocket. As for your unfortunate companion, I'll need to have a non-disclosure agreement. He took out a folded paper. Miss, I need you to understand your silence on this evening events is a matter of national security. Should you decide to go to the press or express the event in any public format, there will be a defamation suit, and you will almost certainly be heavily fined. If you'll sign at the bottom that I have explained these consequences. Also note that any breach of contract once you've signed is grounds for an arrest. He held the form out and a pen. I still had my hands up and not a clue what was happening. Lionel, you're scaring her, Offie said. Well, it is my duty. I'm sorry, my dear, but when one chooses to tango with the royal family, we must take precautions. I gawked at him, then at the forms in his hand, then at Offie. Offie, he told me, Offie with a recognisable family name. But he wasn't Offie at all. Oh, God, I breathed. That's where I've seen you. You're... Oh, my God, what have I done? He knelt down beside me and took my hands. I couldn't look at him. I was burning with shame. How could I have been so stupid? Alice, he said gently, my name is Xavier Dorovich. Do you know who that is? I nodded. It's him. You're him. The Prince of Rhodia. Are you all right? No, I most certainly was not. We were a small country. I might have convinced myself there were far more consequential princes I might have accidentally seduced. But he was my prince, my only prince, the prince who would eventually be my king. Oh, I thought I'd be sick. She didn't know, Lionel asked. I'm better at this than you give me credit for. Offie took the form from him. I'll handle this. If you'll please do me the courtesy of waiting outside, I believe a proper explanation is in order. I can't leave you unguarded. Lionel, please. Lionel looked at me. Poor stupid girl I was. All right, be quick. And if I have to hunt you down again, I will have words with your father. Let's clear out. They left us alone. Once that door shut, I had no idea what to say. How could I fix this? How could I ever live it down? Offie sighed and sat beside me again. Well, now you know. What are my chances of ever seeing you again? I looked at him. Oh, you are out of your mind, I snapped, without thinking. Sorry, God, what do I do? Should I bow? Seems a bit late for it, seeing as you've had your tongue in my mouth. God, it serves me right. I let myself have a night, just one night, to do something foolish, and of course it's the most foolish thing of all time. You told me your name was Offie. He nodded. It is. Xavier is a mouthful. Those who know me, and not well enough, shorten it. I am sorry. I meant to tell you, but it's so hard to talk to people when they know. I'm not that famous. People see me on television now and then. My father's still the face of the family. I can get away with sneaking around from time to time, but never. I don't get to do this. Have a genuine bit of fun with a lovely girl. I wanted the ease of it, the normalcy of it. But I should have been upfront with you, and I apologise. I wanted to give him what for, but I couldn't insult a prince to his face. And he hadn't been awful to me. It was disappointing, that was all. He led me to believe our magical night could potentially become more. But I was just a novelty. Just a night out before he returned to his true life. I am thoroughly mortified, I said. I don't let strange men kiss me. This was special to me, I suppose. I suppose I feel rather used. Well, give me your form. I'll keep quiet about it. Hold on. I wasn't using you. Alice, I meant every word. You are lovely and talented and so charming. Darling, I do want to see you again. Honestly this time. Might I call you? I shook my head. You can't expect. It will be very discreet. There will be no press, no security detail. My father will know nothing of it. Please, I can't tell you what this meant to me. What was he asking? Was I to start an affair with a prince? Did he imagine I'd be agreeable to such a thing? Oh, I don't know, I said. I just don't know. It was beautiful, and you do seem good. But the shame of it, though. I don't care about the press, just me as a person doing something like this. It's not that I don't want to. I just don't want that to be my story. If I become involved with you, that is so significant. And after a lifetime of fairly insignificant things, it would rather define me. I didn't know how to feel about that. He nodded. I understand. Perhaps I'll let you think it over a while and call you in a few days. Or I could use my connections to obtain your contact information, send you a formal, heartfelt apology, and you can forget the whole mess. But I'd like to know you, Alice. I behaved poorly tonight, and I do hope you'll give me the chance to prove I'm better than all that. He was so pretty. It wasn't fair. Why had I been blessed with this perfect man when it turned out to be so complicated? I held out my hand for the form. He gave it to me, and I signed the bottom. Then I wrote my phone number on the back. I might not answer, I said quietly, not really sure what I was getting into. Nothing against you. I don't like taking unexpected calls. It makes me nervous. I also might be overwhelmed by the whole thing. So there, I'll give it to you. But I might not answer. He nodded. Thank you. If I call day after next, would that be all right? I can wait longer. He was so kind. That's fine. But I may not. I know. But I should like to keep calling until you do. I'm so sorry it had to be like this. I had the most gorgeous time tonight, and I hope to see you soon. I nodded. Then suddenly I kissed him. It was quite brief, but it told me what I needed. Sorry, I was hoping that now I know the truth, it would feel different. I see. And did it? I shook my head. Not at all. I suppose I'm truly too stupid to care. He kissed me so softly, I thought I'd melt. Then so am I, he breathed. Good night, darling. I watched him leave. Prince Xavier Dorovich, heir to the Viridian throne, my lips still tingling from his kiss. And I knew no matter what happened next, my life would forever be altered by the moments we shared in that little room at the charity party that first weekend of December. And that is where we're going to end it for tonight, because it really does get a lot more complicated after that. But yes, that's the story of Alice Dyer, who is a stage actress, and she's working at a charity event. She's singing show tunes on the charity stage around Christmas time, and who should be there but the prince of her small country. And it's very cliched and silly, that part. The rest of it, I think, is a little bit more original, a little more unique, and I like the story. I think I don't know, it served its purpose, which is to entertain me. So, but I just thought that was a nice little holiday moment for all of us tonight. So hopefully my weird little stories weren't too weird for you. And you can let me know if you want to do this again, maybe with the same story, maybe with a different one. I have limitless little stories written up and in my brain, so we can see what we come up with. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with me. Sometimes we just need little distractions, don't we? Life's weird. So hopefully this was a good distraction for all of us before we head off into the rest of our lives, or go to bed, or whatever it is we're up to. So thank you so much for spending some time with me tonight, and I hope see you again very, very soon.